The drama begins with the male lead, whose name is Dong Jin. Everyone from his office had already left, but he was working alone late at night. He was making noodles for himself, but his focus was still on his work, and in the process the noodles slipped from his hands. On the other hand, the female lead, whose name is Sim Woo-ju, was drinking with a friend. This friend's name was Yoon Jun. From their conversation, it is revealed that he was a pharmacist. Sim Yu says, "I'm not feeling good. It feels like something bad is going to happen." Jun says, "First, stop drinking coffee and reduce alcohol too. And don't even think about smoking, because I don't want to lose my drinking buddy." Just then, Sim Yu receives a message from a neighbor informing her about the death of someone named Mr. Simulation. In the next scene, dinner is taking place at a restaurant. At the same time, Sim Yu and Jun arrive there. Sim Yu says, "Let's make a bet. The one who loses will have to fulfill one wish of the winner." Jun asks, "What kind of bet?" Sim Yu says, "On whether it will rain tomorrow or not." Sim Yu says, "It will rain tomorrow." Jun checks the weather forecast and sees that the chances of rain are only 10%, so he takes the bet. If rain happens despite a 90% chance against it, that means the sky has gone crazy. Then I will also do something that shows my craziness. Dong Jin was listening to their conversation, but it was clear that they did not know each other. After finishing their meal, both Dong Jin and Sim Yu leave the place and walk in opposite directions. In the next scene, we see that Sim Yu is waking up her younger sister for breakfast. While waking her, she says, "It might rain today. Don't forget your umbrella." Then Sim Yu goes to her younger brother's room and sees that he was studying. So, without disturbing him, she takes her umbrella and leaves. She sees that the weather is completely clear, and there seem to be no chances of rain. On the other hand, we see the scene of Dong Jin's house, where only basic things are kept. Sui informs him, "There is some problem with our Singapore exhibition." At the same time, clouds thunder and heavy rain starts. Meanwhile, Sim Yu, who works part-time at Jun's pharmacy, sees that it has started raining, so she takes her umbrella and leaves. Then, while sitting in a taxi, Sim Yu gets a call from Jun, who asks, "Where did you go? There is a crowd of customers here." Sim Yu says, "I already said yesterday that if it rained, I would do something crazy." Sim Yu arrives at a funeral wearing a very short dress. It was Mr. Sim's funeral. Seeing her in such clothes, everyone was staring at her. Mr. Sim's relatives ask, "Who are you?" Sim Yu says, "You know me. I am Mr. Sim's daughter, Sim Yu. In 15 years, I have grown up and you have grown old." Then we see a flashback scene where Mr. Sim, that is, Sim Yu's dad, ran away from home, taking all the money and valuable things. As he was leaving, abandoning her mother, she had just arrived home from school, but he ignored her and left with Hija. She had come to create a scene at the funeral, so Hija tells her to leave, but Sim Yu refuses and insults Hija in front of everyone by calling her dad's mistress. She says, "You stole your friend's husband." Hija yells in anger, so Sim Yu shouts even louder. Due to embarrassment, Hija somehow controls her anger. When Sim Yu comes out of the washroom, she hears her aunts talking about how Hija has sold the house. So she goes and asks, "Which house has Hija sold?" Her aunt says, "Go and ask Hija yourself." She goes and asks Hija, only to find out that Hija has sold the house where she was living with her brother and sister. At that moment, Sim Yu receives a call from her brother. He says, "Some people have come to the house telling us to vacate it." Sim Yu gets very angry and asks, "Hija, what right did you have to sell the house?" Hija says, "Your grandfather and I were legally married. The house was in your dad's name, and after his death, it became mine. I sold it because it was legally mine." Sim Yu, who had been living in that house for 20 years, was suddenly left homeless. Hija gives her and her family only 1 week to vacate the house. Dong Jin and Sion were trying to arrange funds for the company, but nothing had worked out so far. Dong Jin arrives at the funeral house. At Mr. Sim's funeral, it is revealed that Hija had a son, but he did not want to stay in contact. 5 years later, he was meeting Hija, and that person was Dong Jin. Meanwhile, Sim Yu leaves the funeral house, feeling extremely distracted because now she had no place to stay. She finally loses control and starts crying. Just then, Jun arrives to pick her up, but she cries even harder and says, "If I cry here, everyone will think I'm crying because of my dad's death." After the funeral ends, Hija and Dong Jin sit together. Hija says, "I have sent the money." Hija wanted to get close to Dong Jin, but he had no interest in her. Then we see Sim Yu and her siblings packing their belongings to vacate the house, and Jun was also helping them. Next, we see a scene set 2 months later, where Dong Jin and Sion had established the company using Hija's money and were preparing for an exhibition. After a meeting, Sion goes to lunch with Dong Jin. And during their conversation, it is revealed that Dong Jin had a first girlfriend with whom he used to go camping, but they had since broken up. Sion then asks, "Where did your mom get so much money for investment?" Dong Jin says, "I don't know. And even if she had stolen it, I would still have taken the money because there was no other option." On the other side, we see Hye-seong, who worked at a financial firm. There, a lady comes and starts yelling at her, and even hits her, saying, "You had an affair with my husband." Hija was shocked because she didn't know that her boyfriend was married. She feels extremely guilty and apologizes, saying, "I will never meet your husband again." But the lady does not believe her. Just then, Sim Yu arrives and tells the lady, "I am her younger sister. If she ever meets your husband again, let me know. I'll deal with her myself." Sim Yu then says, "My sister really didn't know. She endured this much humiliation because she is a good person. But I am not a good person at all. Remember that." In the next scene, we see Sim Yu carrying a lot of shopping bags, and Dong Jin enters the elevator and helps her. Sion was also with Dong Jin. All three of them were going up together in the elevator. Sion asks, "Who is this girl?" Dong Jin ignores the question. Then he asks Sim Yu, "Do you know Dong Jin?" Sim Yu replies, "Yes, I know him." Then Dong Jin says, "She is our employee, a part-time office assistant who has been working for a week." After office hours, we see that Sim Yu was keeping an eye on Dong Jin and following him. Actually, Sim Yu had learned from her aunt that Hija had invested all her dad's money into her son's company. Her aunt had also given her Hija's son's business card, which is why she was there. She follows Dong Jin to his building and starts checking all the letterboxes to find his apartment number. Just then, Dong Jin comes up behind her and says, "If you're looking for my apartment, my flat number is 2701. In the next scene, we see how Sim Yu got a job at Dong Jin's company. During the interview, she was asked, "You have quite a lot of experience, so why do you want to work here?" So, Sim Yu had said, "I really want to work at this company, just keep me on trial for 2 days. If you don't like my work, then don't hire me." A store worker had informed Dong Jin, "A girl is following you." Dong Jin ignored it, but she had already reached his building and was checking the letterboxes to find his apartment. Just then, Dong Jin comes up behind her and says, "If you're looking for my apartment, then listen. My flat number is 2701. Sim Yu realizes that Dong Jin had known she was following him. Dong Jin says, "I figured it out on the way." Sim Yu says, "I'm very interested in you, but don't misunderstand. It's not a romantic interest." Dong Jin says, "I don't think so either because you look like you're ready for a fight." Then he adds, "If you want to talk, we can do it tomorrow." Sim Yu asks, "When you knew I was following you, why didn't you stop me earlier? Did you let me come all the way here just to embarrass me?" Dong Jin says nothing, but thinks to himself that he didn't stop her, so he could have a chance to walk away. Sim Yu then starts asking Dong Jin personal questions. "Is this your own house or do you rent it?" Dong Jin says, "I don't know why you were following me, and honestly, I'm not interested in knowing. People at the office don't ask me personal questions, and I don't like it when someone does." Sim Yu says, "Seems like you have a lot of secrets. All right, I'm leaving now." Sim Yu was staying at Jun's house with her family. She was sitting in front of Jun, eating a lot of food. Jun realizes that Sim Yu must be very upset. He remembers that back in school, when his mom was sick, he was very distressed. So Sim Yu had dropped out of school and started looking for a job. At that time, she was learning archery, but to get money, she sold her archery kit and then cried a lot. The next day, Sim Yu was shopping at a supermarket. Dong Jin was also shopping there. He is surprised to see her. Sim Yu says, "Don't think I'm following you this early in the morning. Don't stress. I just moved nearby because I got kicked out of my own house where I had been living for 20 years. Sim Yu wanted to see Dong Jin's reaction. When he says nothing, Sim Yu asks, "Do other people's problems not affect you at all?" Dong Jin says, "I'm not interested in other people's suffering." In the next scene, we see that, as usual, Dong Jin was working late at the office. Then his friend Sion calls him. He tells him, "Come to the class reunion." Dong Jin wasn't interested, so he tells Sion, "Everyone thinks your company is about to go bankrupt. Bring your car so that they think the business is doing fine." At the reunion, one of their classmates gets drunk and asks, "Why did Dong Jin's breakup happen?" Dong Jin immediately silences him and says, "Are you still so involved in other people's matters?" After the party, one of Dong Jin's friends tells him, "Your girlfriend is back in Korea." Dong Jin tells Sion about it. Dong Jin remembers that once when he had gone camping with his girlfriend, she had said, "We should stop meeting now." Then, Dong Jin sees a girl on the other side of the road and thinks she might be his ex-girlfriend. He follows her. The girl enters a cafe. Dong Jin realizes that maybe she was someone else, but in reality, she was his ex-girlfriend. She had seen Dong Jin and was hiding from him. Later that night, Sim Yu goes to the office. Earlier that day, she had stood behind an employee and memorized his password. So now, she logs into his system. The next day, So-Hai says, some confidential documents of Dong Jin were emailed to a competitor company, and the email was sent from Minju's system. but Minju says, I didn't do it. This incident left both Dong Jin and Seon deeply troubled as they tried to find out who had leaked the documents. They didn't believe Minju could have done it. Meanwhile, an angry Minju confronts Sim Yu and asks, why did you come to the office late at night? Actually, another employee had seen her enter the office at night and reported it, which is why Sim Yu was being questioned. Minju says, you saw me typing my password, didn't you? You must have sent the email from my laptop. Sim Yu doesn't admit it, and they start arguing. Hearing the commotion, Dong Jin and other employees leave their meeting and come outside. Dong Jin calls Minju and the other employee to his office. Sim Yu runs to Jun's pharmacy and tells him about her revenge plan. She says, I came to stay at Jun's house only because it's in Dong Jin's area. Hearing this, Jun gets angry and says, how did you drag me into your revenge plan without even asking me? Sim Yu says, I didn't have a revenge plan at first. I just went to Dong Jin's office to ask for my house back. But when I saw how he was living, a luxury apartment, completely indifferent to other people's problems, I decided to take revenge for everything I had suffered. She adds, I didn't send any emails. I only copied some files so that I could use them later if needed. Meanwhile, after listening to his employees, Dong Jin becomes convinced that Sim Yu is the one who leaked the documents. He tells Sim Yu to come with him and takes her to a building. She doesn't know what place this is. Dong Jin says, you must know this place. It's CEO Shin's office, the person who told you to leak the documents. He wanted to take Sim Yu to Shin and confront her directly, but she refuses to go inside. She says, I didn't leak any documents. I'm being blamed just because I've only been at the office for 3 months. Dong Jin then fires Sim Yu and says, from now on, don't come to the office. Sim Yu is extremely upset by Dong Jin's words, and in the next scene, we see that she has been drinking a lot. At that moment, she sees Dong Jin and walks up behind him saying, I didn't do anything. My life may not have been great, but I would never do something like this for money. Hearing her, Dong Jin starts to wonder if she might be telling the truth. So when he gets to the office, he checks the basement CCTV footage and sees that a car arrived at the office late at night. He notes down the car's number and waits to see whose car it is. He finds out that it belongs to one of his trusted employees, under whose supervision Minju worked. It was that employee who had sent the email from Minju's system. The next day, Dong Jin calls Sim Yu and asks to meet her. When they meet, Dong Jin tells her who the real culprit was, apologizes, and asks her to rejoin the office. Sim Yu says, all right, but you'll regret hiring me again. Just then, a man angrily starts charging toward them. Dong Jin realizes that the man is coming to attack him, but he still stands his ground. Seeing this, Sim Yu pushes the man away to stop him. Dong Jin just looks at her in shock. In the next scene, we see Hija saying, I need the money I invested in your company. Since I gave the money, I can ask for it whenever I want. Hearing this, Seon gets a little worried because it had only been a month since they took the money, but Dong Jin immediately agrees to return it. He says, I wasn't comfortable taking money from you anyway. Then we see that when Dong Jin was talking to Sim Yu, the angry man suddenly ran toward him to attack. Sim Yu sees this and stops him. The man falls down. Dong Jin helps him up. Before leaving, Sim Yu tells Dong Jin, if someone attacks you and you just stand there, it doesn't mean you're a good person, it just means you're a fool. This man's name was Kim, and he had suffered losses due to Dong Jin's business relationships and the leak of company documents. Dong Jin then tells Seon, Sim Yu didn't leak the documents. It was our own trusted employee, Yongmin. When Dong Jin had followed Yongmin, he had even seen him meeting CEO Shin. The next day, Sim Yu arrives at the office. Dong Jin was waiting for her. Before he could say anything, Sim Yu says, I didn't help you yesterday. It just happened, so there's no need to say thank you. Still, Dong Jin says, thank you, and walks inside. Seeing her at the office, all the employees are shocked. Minju comes up to her and asks, what are you doing here? You were fired. Just then, Dong Jin arrives and says, I called her. If anyone has a problem, they can talk to me. Even after learning the truth about Yongmin, Dong Jin didn't take any immediate action. He continued attending his usual meetings. After a meeting, Dong Jin asked Seon, why did you rehire Sim Yu? Seon replies, she came because I called her, and from now on she will work with Yongmin. Dong Jin knew that by doing this, Shin would try to trap another employee, making it hard for him to trust his staff. Dong Jin wanted Sim Yu to keep an eye on Yongmin under the pretense of working with him. However, Yongmin didn't like this, as Sim Yu had been placed on his team. At the slightest mistake, he scolds her harshly. In response, Sim Yu says in front of everyone, if you have a problem with me, talk directly to the CEO. There's no need to overreact. Hearing this, Yongmin gets very angry, but Soo-hui steps in and handles the situation. Sim Yu is furious. During lunch, she tells Dong Jin, I don't want to keep an eye on Yongmin. Then she asks, knowing everything, how can you tolerate him? Dong Jin replies, I have a lot of patience. My girlfriend was cheating on me, but I ignored it for a whole year. After lunch, as they walk back to the office, Xiong sees them together. At that moment, a cyclist passes by them, and Dong Jin instinctively pulls Sim Yu toward him to protect her. Xiong sees this as well. In the next scene, Hija arrives at Dong Jin's office to meet him. Sim Yu is asked to bring coffee for her. At that moment, memories of Hija's past actions come flooding back to her. When she takes the coffee to Hija, Hija doesn't even recognize her. This triggers both Sim Yu's anger and her desire for revenge. She remembers an old incident, how she had once secretly watched her father leaving a hotel with his girlfriend, Hija. That was the day she had discovered her father's affair. In her rage, she had jumped in front of his car. Even after getting hurt, she had cried, not because of the injury, but because of her father's betrayal. In the next scene, when Dong Jin is leaving the office, he runs into Sim Yu. On behalf of his mother, he apologizes to her and says, "From now on, you don't have to bring coffee. That's not your job." Sim Yu responds, "Keeping an eye on Yongmin isn't my job either, but because of you, I have to do it." After office hours, Sim Yu waits for Yongmin in the parking lot. When he arrives, she says, "Does your boss know you're working with Shin? That you're the one who leaked company information? If you really want to destroy this company, you'll have to try harder." Saying this, she walks away. In the next scene, we see Sim Yu at Jun's pharmacy, telling him everything. She also says, "I met Hija today, but she didn't even recognize me. It hasn't even been that long since my dad died. Yet she's already forgotten him and has a new boyfriend." Sim Yu asks Jun, "Tell me, was what I did wrong?" Meanwhile, Xiong approaches Dong Jin and stops him. Xiong had met him once before at a bank. She introduces herself and says, "I saw my sister, Sim Yu, with you." Then she asks, "Are you involved with my sister?" Dong Jin replies, "We just work together." Xiong invites him to have a beer with her. He refuses, but Xiong keeps trying to convince him. Meanwhile, Xiong and Sim Yu's brother also arrives. Finally, giving in, Dong Jin sits inside with them, but he feels extremely awkward. He steps outside and calls Sim Yu. She doesn't answer. When he returns inside, Sim Yu is shocked to see him. She immediately grabs his hand and pulls him outside, saying, "I need to talk to you." Everyone is happy, thinking at least Sim Yu has held a man's hand. Outside, Sim Yu asks Dong Jin, "Do you know my sister? Have you ever dated her?" Dong Jin replies, "I've only met her twice, once at the bank and today. I didn't even know she was your sister." Sim Yu relaxes a bit and then says, "All right then, but from now on, avoid her. I don't like you being around my family." Dong Jin doesn't like hearing this. He says, "You talk so rudely. Do you think people don't get hurt? If you have to talk like this, you shouldn't talk at all." At home, Dong Jin remembers a past moment when he went camping with his girlfriend. There she had told him, "I want to break up." But then she had added, "I'm getting married next month." She had simply said sorry and walked away. Dong Jin had teared up and said, "You shouldn't have done this to me. I even ignored your affair. But if you walk away now, everything will be over." In the next scene, Sion secretly meets Kim, but Kim leaves without revealing much. Sion doesn't tell Dong Jin about this. Meanwhile, Kim tries to apply for a loan at a bank. Sion senses something is wrong and says, "I'll handle Mr. Kim." Later, Sion finds out that Dong Jin's ex-girlfriend had moved back to the same apartment where she used to live, right across from Dong Jin's flat. In reality, after returning, she had tried several times to meet Dong Jin. She had even gone to his home multiple times, but at the last moment she would always back out. The next day, at the office, Sim Yu remembers Yongmin's words. He had revealed his entire plan, saying, "I'm going to destroy Best Fair." According to his plan, everyone at the company believed that after the camping fair, things would return to normal. But they had no idea that the fair itself wouldn't take place, because Shin and Kim were forming a team. Dong Jin had invested all his money and the company's funds into this fair. If it didn't happen, the company would shut down. Thinking about all this, Sim Yu rushes to Dong Jin's office, only to find out that he hasn't arrived yet. Dong Jin knew nothing about Kim's situation, so he had gone to meet him. Kim says, "I'm sorry," and adds, "I can't sign the contract." Dong Jin replies, "All right, I'm not going to beg for this, but you should have apologized earlier. Now it's too late." Then he remembers when he had received his ex-girlfriend's wedding invitation. He had been completely devastated. Every day, he had felt like dying, but he had thought that if he died, people would gossip about him. After signing the contract with Kim, Dong Jin returns to the office. There he finds his ex-girlfriend waiting for him. Seeing her, he feels unsettled for a moment as memories of their time together flood his mind. But pulling himself together, he walks out of the office. However, she follows him. He tells her, "After what you did to me, you can't just appear in front of me like this. If you ever see me on the street, you should run in the opposite direction." As he turns to leave, she says, "I've moved back to where I used to live, right across from your flat." Dong Jin replies, "Maybe people don't change. You're still the same." After this, Dong Jin feels extremely sad. He drinks too much. He calls Sion and asks, "Did you know my ex was living nearby?" Then, getting emotional, he says, "The girl I dated for 7 years who was with me just a day before, she sent me her wedding invitation." As he starts crossing the road, a car approaches. He stands frozen. Just before the car can hit him, Sim-yu pulls him back and says, "You really scared me?" She shows her anger at Dong Jin. Dong Jin just stares at her in surprise. In the next scene, we see that Sim-yu had also been there and had seen Dong Jin with a girl. She immediately understood that it was his ex-girlfriend, the one who had cheated on him for a year. Later, while returning home from the office, she had seen Dong Jin drinking alone. He was quite drunk, so she had decided to follow him. She had also overheard his words. Then, we see Dong Jin stepping onto the road while a speeding car approaches from the other side. Sim-yu rushes forward and pulls him back just in time. She angrily asks, "What were you doing?" Dong Jin says, "I wasn't trying to commit suicide." Sim-yu snaps, "Then why did you foolishly let everything go? The moment you found out, you should have broken up. You should have taken revenge. You should have destroyed her. Instead, you're ruining yourself." Dong Jin replies, "I think I'm just tired. Stop following me." Sim-yu stops when she notices Dong Jin's injured hand. She had brought a bandage for him. She tells him, "You said on the phone that she sent you her wedding invitation. You should have gone there and created a scene." Dong Jin asks, "How does making a scene count as revenge?" Then, Sim-yu tells Dong Jin about Yong-min. "He's luring your clients away so that you won't even be able to organize your camping fair." The next day, Dong Jin meets all the clients to understand the situation. Then he wonders, how did Sim-yu find out about all this? Yong-min wouldn't have told her himself. Dong Jin doesn't say anything, just remembers how many times she has helped him and how she had said, "I'm not a spy." Dong Jin and Seon meet with the clients and find out that none of them want to work with them anymore. Only Sim-yu knew about this at the office, and she was busy looking for new clients. When Dong Jin and Seon meet a client, they learn that Shinwoo Fair is attracting their clients. That fair is scheduled to take place a week before theirs, and they are offering clients a big discount if they cancel Dong Jin's contract and join them instead. Dong Jin shows the clients a picture of Yong-min and asks, "Was it him who met you?" The clients confirm it was. Later, when Yong-min returns home, he finds Dong Jin waiting for him. Dong Jin says, "You don't need to come to the office from tomorrow. I'm telling you this now because I don't want to do it in front of all the employees." Meanwhile, at the office, So-hui, Seon, and Sim-yu are packing Yong-min's belongings. Seon is searching his laptop, trying to find information about their plans. Sim-yu tells him he hid the files in this folder. After everyone leaves, Sim-yu stays back. Just then, Dong Jin's ex-girlfriend arrives at the office and heads straight to Dong Jin's office. Sim-yu tells her he's already gone home, but just then Dong Jin arrives. His ex-girlfriend says, "I need to talk to him alone." Dong Jin replies, "Just because you want to talk, you think I will too?" She says, "I have something to tell you about CEO Shin. I met him as an investor to gather information." Dong Jin shows no interest. She then adds, "I didn't come here for that. I never got married. I was alone in America the whole time, and I want to apologize to you." Dong Jin replies, "No matter how many reasons you come up with, you should never show up in front of me again." Then, Dong Jin tells Sim-yu to leave with him. Sim-yu takes his hand and walks out with him. His ex-girlfriend just watches them go. Outside, Dong Jin pulls his hand away and says, "You can stop now." They had dinner plans, but Dong Jin says, "We'll have dinner some other time." Sim-yu asks, "Why? Just because I held your hand, you got so upset? If you want, I can go back upstairs and tell her that there's nothing going on between us." Dong Jin says, "Are we friends? Is that why you're talking to me like this? And please never do this again." Sim-yu gets angry. She says, "Did I hug or kiss you? I just held your hand. Even school kids hold hands. Stop overreacting and come to dinner." In the end, Dong Jin goes to dinner. There, she thanks him and says, "I just didn't want to have dinner alone again." After leaving the restaurant, they are walking together. Then, Sim-yu sees her brother working at a cafe. She is shocked to see him there. She waits outside for him. Her brother looks scared when he sees her. Sim-yu tells Dong Jin, "You can leave now." But her brother hides behind Dong Jin. He says, "Please don't go, or she'll beat me up." Then he tells Sim-yu, "I've quit the civil service exam. I want to try singing." Sim-yu yells at him, and he gets so scared that he pushes Dong Jin and runs away. Dong Jin and Sim-yu bump into each other and remain still for a few seconds. Then Sim-yu says, "I'm going home." The next morning, Sim-yu looks for her brother, but finds out that he never came home last night. He had actually borrowed clothes from Jun so he wouldn't have to go home for a few days. Meanwhile, Sun-woo visits their office. He gives them a brochure for his camping exhibition. Then, we see a flashback scene. When Dong Jin and Seon had told Shin that they were leaving his company to start their own, Shin had tried everything to stop them. Shin had even threatened them, saying, I'll ruin you. Seeing the brochure, Dong Jin doesn't react much. Shin had expected him to be shocked, but Dong Jin already knew what Shin was up to. Dong Jin says, I know why you're doing all this. Then another flashback. When Dong Jin and Seon left Shin's company with a few employees, his company suffered badly. Shin had been drinking alone when Dong Jin had come to see him. Shin had fallen to his knees in front of Dong Jin and begged, please come back just for 6 months. At that moment, Shin's wife had called him, but he couldn't answer. Actually, Shin's wife had been unwell at the time, and she had called him for that reason. Shin had missed the call, and he still blames Dong Jin for it. That's why he is trying to take revenge. Dong Jin points this out, and Shin starts yelling, because of you, I couldn't be there for my wife. Dong Jin stays silent. Seon, furious, yells at Shin and throws him out of the office. Next scene. Sim Yu is searching for her brother everywhere, but there is no sign of him. Seong tells her, he ran away because of you. You just want to control him. Just because you supported him doesn't mean he has to live according to you. The next day, employees at Dong Jin's office start leaving one by one. By the end, only a few people are left. Dong Jin comes up with an idea. He wants to create a premium camping experience that will set their fare apart from Shin's. But the problem is that they don't have enough funds to organize the event. Seon tells Dong Jin his ex-girlfriend offered to invest, but Dong Jin immediately refuses. Then Dong Jin remembers his uncle, who had helped him before. However, he calls a friend named Kong instead. Before Dong Jin can even ask, Kong says, I'll help. This gives Dong Jin hope again. In the next scene, Dong Jin's ex-girlfriend comes to the office and tells Sim Yu, I live in the apartment right across from Dong Jin's. Now Sim Yu realizes why Dong Jin had been staying at a hotel. Meanwhile, Sim Yu's brother is standing around, unsure where to go. Then he sees Dong Jin and becomes happy. On the other hand, we see Sim Yu's aunt meeting a real estate agent to ask about her brother's house. Then she calls Sim Yu and tells her, Hija didn't sell the house to kick us out. She moved in herself. Hearing this, Sim Yu is completely shocked. She reaches the office but then turns back. Dong Jin sees her leaving and is surprised. He doesn't understand why Sim Yu left. Just then, he gets a call from a real estate agent. The agent urgently calls him and says, the girl you were looking for is about to come here. Meanwhile, Sim Yu arrives at her old house and sees Hija's boyfriend leaving. Sim Yu gets furious and starts banging on the door loudly. Next, we see a flashback scene. Dong Jin visits his mother, Hija, and asks, what happened to the people who used to live here? His mother replies, how would I know? They must be living somewhere. Dong Jin asks for any of their phone numbers, but his mother gets angry. When I was selling this house to give you money, you didn't have a problem. Dong Jin says, maybe that's why I'm being punished now. Later, he meets a real estate agent who tells him, your mother threw the kids out of the house very cruelly. Dong Jin says, if you find any information about them, call me. In the present, Sim Yu finds out that Hija is living in her house. She reaches the house and rings the doorbell, then angrily yells at Hija, why are you living here? You should have sold the house. She is extremely furious. Hearing her yelling, Hija calls the police. On the other side, the real estate agent calls Dong Jin and tells him, the girl you were looking for is about to come here. Dong Jin immediately leaves his office and rushes to the agent's place. But when he arrives, the agent says, she didn't come here. Maybe she went home. Dong Jin reaches her house, but by then the police have already taken Sim Yu away. Sim Yu's aunt pays the fine to get her released and hands her Dong Jin's business card. She says, Hija's son is nothing like her. He gave his business card to a real estate agent so that if they found any information about us, he could apologize. Not only that, but he's also trying to get our house back for us. Hearing this, Sim Yu is completely shocked. She feels extremely guilty because, until now, she saw Dong Jin as her enemy, which is why she supported his competitors. But now that she knows he was actually trying to help her and her siblings, she feels even worse. Meanwhile, Dong Jin's ex-girlfriend returns home and finds Sim Yu waiting for her. Sim Yu says, you cheated on a lonely person and made him even lonelier. And now you live right across from his house? Do you even know that because of you, he had to stay in a hotel? If you don't want to see me every day, then leave. His ex replies, do you think I'll leave just because you told me to? If I were that good, I wouldn't have cheated in the first place. Then she invites Sim Yu for a drink. Sim Yu doesn't know what to do but ends up going with her. Meanwhile, Sim Yu's brother is waiting at Dong Jin's place after cooking a meal for him. He had nowhere else to stay, so Dong Jin had brought him home. On the other hand, Sim Yu goes drinking with Dong Jin's ex. She tells Sim Yu, I'll try one last time. If he forgives me, I'll leave. She drinks too much, so Sim Yu carries her home. That night, Sim Yu ends up sleeping at Dong Jin's ex's place. The next morning, Sim Yu gets into the elevator, where Dong Jin is also present. She tries to avoid his gaze. He asks, where did you sleep last night? She replies, at Dong Jin's ex's place. Sim Yu is hungry, so they go to a restaurant to eat. She feels very nervous. Dong Jin says, "Eat comfortably. I won't ask anything while we're eating." After finishing their meal, they go for coffee, and Sim Yu starts explaining on her own. "I found out that his ex was living right across from his house. It made me so angry because he was staying in a hotel because of her, while she was comfortably living at home. That's why I told her to move out." Dong Jin asks, "But why did you say all that?" She replies, "Because I felt like it." On the other side, Sim Yu's brother is searching for something in Dong Jin's house. Just then, he finds a photo in which Hija and Dong Jin are together. He couldn't recall, but he felt like he had seen this lady somewhere before. At that time, Dong Jin was returning home. In the elevator, he runs into his ex. She says, "I'm changing my house." Dong Jin says, "If you're changing it because of me, there's no need. You can stay there. Finally, now it doesn't matter to me anymore." Meanwhile, Sim Yu meets Jun for drinks. She tells him, "Give me some time. I'll sort everything out." Then Jun says, "I've already told your mom everything." Hearing this, she gets furious and says, "Are you out of your mind?" Jun says, "Not more than you." Then he says, "That man is the son of the woman you hate the most in this world, and now you're getting close to him?" Sim Yu says, "It's not like I'm falling in love with him. I just don't want him to be so lonely." "So what does this feeling mean? I don't love him or anything?" Jun is shocked. In the next scene, we see Sim Yu's brother watching Sim Yu. She was drunk and couldn't even walk. She was sitting on a bench, recalling everything she had said to Jun about Dong Jin. After hearing her confession, Jun had left. She kept drinking alone. Meanwhile, Dong Jin receives a message from Sim Yu's brother, and he immediately leaves. The message reads, "I'm going for a part-time job, so please drop my sister home." She's drunk and sitting at the playground. She tells Dong Jin, "You go home, I'll go alone." But Dong Jin stays. Sim Yu says, "My dad was having an affair. When I found out, I couldn't control my anger. To scare my dad, I jumped in front of his car, but in the end, I was the one who got punished." Sim Yu then says, "If you like me, you shouldn't. Then all the problems will be over. I'm just asking for one favor." Dong Jin says nothing. The next day, Jun messages Sim Yu, "I called your mom yesterday, but she didn't pick up, so I couldn't tell her anything." Hearing this, she feels a little relieved. On the other hand, we see Dong Jin, who has gone to meet a client. The client says, "Mr. Shin's condition is really bad right now. In the rush to take on more clients, he reduced his prices too much, thinking that the investment he'd get from Minhee, Dong Jin's ex-girlfriend, would help him manage everything. But now he can't even contact Minhee." Then we see Dong Jin making a call from his office. Sim Yu picks up the phone because everyone else was in a meeting. Dong Jin's phone wasn't opening a document, so he tells Sim Yu, "Check it from my office and let me know." She goes to his office and texts him the information. There, she also sees a real estate agent's number. She recalls her aunt's words, "Dong Jin was looking for you through this agent." Then, we see Sim Yu visiting that real estate agency. After that, the agent calls Dong Jin. Actually, Sim Yu had sent a message to Dong Jin through the agent. "We've shifted to a good place now, so we don't need a house anymore. And Dong Jin should stop trying to find us." Meanwhile, at lunch, Dong Jin meets Seon. He asks him, "You like Sim Yu, so why don't you ask her out on a date?" Dong Jin says, "I promised myself that I would never get hurt again, never be alone again. Every relationship ends the same way, so I will protect myself from all this." When he returns, he runs into Minhee. He says, "I don't really have the right to say this, but I want you to stop drinking. You've punished yourself enough." Then he starts to leave. Shin sees all this. He feels like the two of them are working against him. He angrily moves forward, but Sim Yu appears in front of him and stops him. The scene cuts and we see events from a few hours earlier. Sim Yu had found out from Jun that her brother was working at a certain place, so she goes there. She says, "Enough is enough. Wherever you're staying, wrap it up and come back home to resume your studies." Her brother says, "I won't do that. I want to pursue singing." Sim Yu starts getting angry, so he asks her, "Why do you hate my singing so much?" Sim Yu says, "I can't do much for you all, but I can at least tell you to study so you can get a decent job and buy a good house for yourself, so your future will be secure." Hearing this, her brother gets a little emotional and agrees to come home. She asks, "Who were you staying with?" Her brother says, "I was staying with Dong Jin." Hearing this, she first scolds him, then sends him home and heads toward Dong Jin's house. Outside the building, she sees Dong Jin with Minhee and also notices Shin angrily approaching Dong Jin. She steps in front of Shin, blocking his way, and says, "Stay away from Dong Jin, or it won't be good." Sim Yu then returns home and texts Dong Jin, "Send my brother's stuff." Dong Jin calls her, but she doesn't answer. So he texts, "Sorry, I didn't tell you about your brother." Sim Yu replies, okay? Next, we see Shin telling Yongmin about Sim-yu and Min-hee. He says, these three have been working against me from the beginning. Yongmin says, maybe Min-hee was on his side at first, but Sim-yu was against Dong Jin. Dong Jin and Sim-yu didn't even like each other before. Yongmin keeps trying to call Sim-yu. When she finally answers, she says, I don't know anything, don't call me. Then we see that even after everyone else had left, Dong Jin and Sim-yu were working late at the office. Sim-yu texts Dong Jin, my work is done, so I'm heading home. I'll collect my brother's stuff some other time. Dong Jin calls her and says, I'm leaving too, so we can pick it up together. Sim-yu had been avoiding Dong Jin for a few days. Dong Jin says, you say you don't want a comfortable life, but you make me the most uncomfortable. I haven't even done anything, yet you're avoiding me. Can't we at least behave like friends? Sim-yu says, that's just how I am. My mood keeps changing. Dong Jin says, tell your brother to pick up his own stuff. Then he walks away. On the other side, we see Mr. Shin. His clients were slowly realizing that he had no money. In the next scene, Su-hui asks Sim-yu about renewing her contract. Sim-yu refuses and says, after this month I won't be working here anymore. Su-hui then informs Dong Jin, Sim-yu didn't accept the full-time position offer. Dong Jin says, it's fine. If she doesn't want to work here, you can't force her. In the next scene, we see Min-hee taking out the trash outside the building. Just then, Mr. Shin arrives, drunk, holding a large stone in his hand. He says, you didn't treat me well, so I've come to take revenge. Shin raises the stone and moves toward Min-hee. Sim-yu arrives and tries to stop him, but Shin forcefully throws the stone at her. Then we see Dong Jin rushing to the hospital. Sim-yu had stepped in front of Min-hee, so the stone hit her instead. Dong Jin sends Min-hee away and sits beside Sim-yu, placing his hand on her cheek. Sim-yu opens her eyes and holds Dong Jin's hand. As everyone rushes to the hospital, Sion is already there, and so is Shin. Dong Jin angrily moves toward Shin, but Sion stops him. Dong Jin shouts, I ignored everything you did to me, but what kind of grudge made you hit someone with a stone? Shin remains silent. We see that Sim-yu has 5 stitches near her eyebrow. She sits quietly, feeling immense guilt for what she did. Then she says, enough is enough, let's end this enmity here. Dong Jin places his hand on her cheek, and Sim-yu puts her hand over his. Sim-yu says, I could have reacted at the moment, but I felt it was necessary. Otherwise, Shin might have done something even worse. Apologizing, she adds, I really want you to have a comfortable life. That's why I went there. Dong Jin says, let's talk about something else. I'm tired of saying sorry. They feel hungry, so they go to a store to grab something to eat. Sim-yu asks, can I come to pick up my brother's stuff from your place? Or should I send him instead? Dong Jin says, I'll wait for you. At the office, Dong Jin texts Sim-yu, asking if she wants to go for lunch. Sim-yu agrees. They have lunch together and also grab coffee. In the next scene, Dong Jin and Sim-yu visit a cafe. Dong Jin asks, will you go camping with me? Sim-yu agrees. The next day, Dong Jin and Sim-yu leave for camping. He always loved camping, but 3 years ago, Min-hee broke up with him at a campsite. Since then, this was his first time going camping again. The campsite belonged to Dong Jin's uncle. His uncle is happy to see him, but a little surprised to see Sim-yu. He tells them about a campsite deep in the forest, his favorite spot, and says, someday, we'll go there. Meanwhile, Sim-yu's brother tries calling her, but she's fallen asleep in the car. We then see her mother, Wai, trying to unlock the door of her old house. At that moment, Hija's boyfriend arrives. Just as they start talking, Sim-yu's brother shows up and tells their mother, this isn't our house anymore. He takes her to Jun's pharmacy so Jun can explain everything. Sim-yu and Seong also arrive there. Back home, their mother tells the 3 of them, from now on, you're orphans. Consider me dead. Hearing this, all 3 apologize and cry uncontrollably. Sim-yu also cries a lot. She steps outside and weeps alone. The next morning, during breakfast, Sim-yu's brother notices something. He says, Mom only makes these dishes when it's someone's birthday. Is it yours? Jun says, idiot, it's not mine. It's Sim-yu's birthday. After breakfast, everyone leaves for work, but Sim-yu stays home. Her mother is crying while working. Sim-yu says, I took the day off. I also texted Dong Jin, telling him that my mom is here so I won't be coming to the office. Sim-yu tells her mother, do you remember how I acted at Dad's funeral? She still feels embarrassed about that incident and breaks down while talking about it. Meanwhile, at the office, an employee informs everyone, Young Min has applied for the job we advertised. Sion angrily says, reply to him that he will never be hired at our company. Dong Jin knew it was Sim-yu's birthday. He had seen it on her resume and remembered. So he leaves work early and buys a cake from a bakery. Back at home, Sim-yu's mom asks her about everyone. Sim-yu says, my brother is working a part-time job somewhere. Her mom wants to see him at work. When her brother sees them there, he is shocked. He pulls Sim-yu aside and says, Dong Jin bought a cake for you. When Sim Yu and her brother return home, they see their mother and Dong Jin sitting together talking. As everyone starts leaving, Sim Yu's mother tells her, "Your brother and I will go home first. You two can come later if you want," after having coffee. Sim Yu asks Dong Jin, "What were you talking about with my mom?" Dong Jin says, "She told me that out of you three, you're the most sensitive one. You just keep your exterior hard." While returning, a bicycle comes very close to Sim Yu, so Dong Jin quickly pulls her toward him and then holds her hand as they walk. Sim Yu doesn't pull her hand away either. Meanwhile, we see Seon, who is the last one to leave the office. Suddenly, Yongmin appears and falls to his knees in front of him. Yongmin wants to be rehired and says, "You guys even hired Sim Yu." Seon is shocked, wondering how she helped him. The next day, Seon calls Sim Yu and asks, "Is what I said true?" Sim Yu says yes. Seon becomes extremely troubled. He doesn't know whether to tell Dong Jin or not because he likes him so much. He asks Sim Yu for a reason, but she remains silent, though she too is very tense. After work, Sim Yu goes to Dong Jin's house with him. He cooks for her, and they eat together. After dinner, Dong Jin tells Sim Yu about his uncle. Dong Jin says, "My mom had many marriages, and one of them was with my uncle. But out of all my mom's husbands, he was the only one I liked. I considered him like my dad." He shares a lot about himself and says, "I'm telling you everything because I want things to be good this time." Then Dong Jin asks, "Can you stay here tonight?" Sim Yu agrees. She calls Seong and tells her, "I won't be coming home tonight. She might regret it later, but right now she just wanted to stay with Dong Jin." Seong says, "Okay, I'll make up some excuse for mom." Sim Yu and Dong Jin continue talking. She asks, "Why is your house so empty?" Dong Jin replies, "Because I always wanted to disappear somewhere for a while, but circumstances led me to start a company, and there's always some problem there." Then Dong Jin asks Sim Yu, "What's your dream?" Sim Yu says, "My dream is for Seong to marry a good guy." After a while, Dong Jin kisses Sim Yu, and they share an intimate moment. In the morning, before Dong Jin wakes up, Sim Yu makes breakfast for him and leaves. She calls Seong, asks to meet, and tells her, "Give me some time. I will tell Dong Jin everything myself." A flashback shows Hija's boyfriend meeting Sim Yu's mom. He tells her, "The house should actually belong to your children, and if she gives him 30 million won, he will tell her how to get the house back." Sim Yu's mom replies, "Bring me a solution first, then I'll give you the money." Some people are looking for Hija's boyfriend for money, so he steals Hija's jewelry and runs away. Hija then packs all her belongings and reaches Dong Jin's building, where she meets Min Hee. Hija doesn't know why Dong Jin and Min Hee broke up and now thinks they've reconciled. Min Hee tells Hija, "I'll tell you how our breakup happened. When I was dating Dong Jin, I went on a blind date because of my mom. Then things led to an arranged marriage. And do you know why I agreed to marry another guy? Because I was tired of you constantly asking me for money." Just then, Dong Jin arrives and hears everything. He had no idea about this. He apologizes to Min Hee and takes his mom inside. Then he asks, "How much money did you take from Min Hee?" But Hija doesn't answer properly and says, "It wasn't much." At the office, Sim Yu doesn't want to continue working after her contract ends. Dong Jin tells her, "Consider it again." In the next scene, Sim Yu's mom brings her to her aunt's house and tells her to explain everything about the house and Hija. The aunt says, "Sim Yu knows more than me. She even met Hija's son." Hearing this, Sim Yu's mom calls her over and asks, "You met Hija's son? What did he say?" Sim Yu says, her son wasn't involved in this. Still, he was looking for her so he could apologize on her behalf. That's why I met him. And when he apologized, I accepted it. Sim Yu says, "Just like we suffered because of dad, he had to endure because of his mom." Mom asks, "Are you hiding anything else?" Sim Yu denies it. At that moment, Dong Jin calls Sim Yu and asks, "Where are you?" She replies, "Some family issue came up." Then he arrives there. Just then, Seyong and her brother also arrive. Sim Yu is happy and asks her brother to sing for everyone since he has been practicing singing. But no one knew how well he could actually sing. He sings for everyone, and he sings really well. Meanwhile, Sim Yu keeps looking at him repeatedly. After leaving, he says goodnight and heads home. On the way, he remembers that Sim Yu's bag, which she had left at the office, is still with him. So he calls Dong Jin and says, "I'll come and return the bag." But Sim Yu says, "Don't come. I'll come and get it." Hearing Dong Jin's name, Jun's expression changes slightly. He tells Sim Yu, "It's not safe to go out this late. You can return it later." Seong notices this. After Sim Yu leaves, Seong asks Jun, "Do you have a problem with Dong Jin?" Jun tries to avoid the topic, but Seong senses that he is hiding something. She keeps insisting, saying, "I won't go home until you tell me." So Jun calls Sim-yu back. Sim-yu had just reached home when Seong suddenly remembers that Sim-yu once said, "I could never date Dong Jin under any circumstances." She starts thinking that he must be married and having an affair. When Sim-yu arrives, Seong slaps her hard and says, "You saw what happened to mom after dad's affair? How could you date a married man?" Sim-yu starts crying and apologizing. Jun can't hold back anymore and intervenes, saying, "He's not married. He is the son of the woman your dad had an affair with." Sim-yu had joined his company for revenge, but the situation changed. Seong is completely shocked after hearing this. She asks Jun, "You knew everything, yet you didn't tell me." Jun apologizes and says, "I felt bad for Sim-yu, so I gave her a chance to handle it herself." Meanwhile, Hija sells a house to a couple for a very low price and transfers the money to her account. One of Hija's boyfriend's men had been keeping an eye on her and calls him saying, "She sold the house." Hija's boyfriend listens to an old call recording where Hija in anger says, "My husband," meaning Sim-yu's grandfather, "didn't even mention my name in his will and left the house to his children." Hija had hidden that will so that no one could find out. At the office, everyone leaves for the camping fair. Sim-yu doesn't go because she doesn't want to work at this company anymore. Dong Jin also doesn't go because he plans to finish some work before joining them. The next day, Seong comes home early and tells her mom, "Last night I slapped Sim-yu." She also reveals Dong Jin is Hija's son and Sim-yu loves him. She tells everything because she's worried about Sim-yu, who knows nothing. Sim-yu's mom asks, "Does Dong Jin know about this?" Seong replies, "No." Meanwhile, Seon tells Dong Jin, "Sim-yu supported Yong-min." Dong Jin asks, "Why didn't you ask her why she did that?" Seon replies, "She didn't tell me." Dong Jin keeps trying to call Sim-yu, but her phone has been off since the morning and he can't reach her. Sim-yu calls Dong Jin and asks to meet. She calls him near her old house. She says, "This was our home. I lived here for more than 20 years, but someone took it away from us." Dong Jin starts realizing that his mom was the one who evicted Sim-yu's family. Sim-yu says, "I wanted revenge, but by the time I realized my mistake, it was too late." She apologizes. Dong Jin asks, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? It must have been so hard for you to handle everything alone." Sim-yu looks at Dong Jin in surprise and asks, "Why aren't you angry? I betrayed you. You wanted revenge, but you didn't take it." She starts crying and Dong Jin hugs her, crying. Sim-yu says, "My family knows everything now, so we can't see each other anymore." Tears well up in Dong Jin's eyes too, but without saying anything, he walks away. The next day, Dong Jin meets a real estate agent and finds out that his mom has already sold the house and taken most of the money. He tries to contact his mom, but she's unreachable. Meanwhile, she visits her ex-husband and asks for some papers she had given him for safekeeping. But he says, "I burned those papers." At the office, everyone is happy because their camping fair was a great success. During a meeting, Dong Jin announces, "I'm taking a leave for some time." On the other hand, Sim-yu starts working at Jun's pharmacy again. The atmosphere at home is not good at all. Sim-yu tells Jun, "I'm looking for another job. After that, I won't work at the pharmacy." The next day, Seong calls Sim-yu and says, "I found a house where we can all move in." Sim-yu asks, "Do we have enough money?" Seong replies, "Mom will contribute some, and I'll cover the rest by using my savings and canceling my insurance." Sim-yu doesn't agree with this, so Seong says, "I don't want to argue with you. I just want to fulfill my responsibility as your elder sister." Meanwhile, Dong Jin, searching for his mom, goes to his uncle's place. His uncle gives him a file and says, "Your mom asked me to keep this some time ago. We never opened it, but when she came to take it back, we saw what was inside. That's why we were about to meet you." Dong Jin checks the file and finds Sim-yu's dad's will inside. On his way back, he recalls how his mom repeatedly said, "This house is ours. I didn't steal it." While returning home, Sim-yu runs into Hija's boyfriend. He plays the recording of Hija talking about the will. He says, "You should file a case against Hija." But Sim-yu realizes that he has his own motives, so she refuses to take his help. Meanwhile, Dong Jin returns home and finds Hija there. He says, "I have the will and I will return the house to Sim-yu and her family." Hija pleads, "Don't do this or I will die." But Dong Jin walks away. Sim-yu calls her mom and tells her about the recording. She says, "We'll have to file a police complaint to get the will from Hija." Her mom asks, "What about Dong Jin?" Sim-yu replies, "I don't want him to suffer. I just want him to live peacefully and be happy. We can be happy even without that house, right?" At that moment, Dong Jin arrives to meet Sim-yu and overhears everything. He looks at her and asks, "Why are you here?" Then he tells her, "I have my dad's will that my mom hid." He hands over the will and says, "Now your family can take back the house." Dong Jin also tells her, "I'm taking a break from the office for a while." At home, Sim-yu gives the will to Seong, which clearly states that their dad left the house to his children. Seong gets emotional and starts crying. Meanwhile, Hija returns to the house but still refuses to accept that it no longer belongs to her. She talks on the phone with the people she sold the house to and says, "Move in as soon as possible. Send the remaining money right now." Dong Jin meets the buyer of the house. The buyer is now suspicious because Hija is insisting on moving in quickly. He starts feeling that something is wrong. He himself asks to cancel the contract and tells Dong Jin, "Give me my money back." Dong Jin replies, "I will contact you once I arrange the money." Sim Yu, Seong, and Jun visit a lawyer regarding the will. The lawyer says the easiest way to reclaim the house is to file criminal charges against Hija. After leaving the lawyer's office, the three go to a restaurant where Sim Yu says, "I will meet Dong Jin and ask him to convince his mom to return the house. If Hija refuses, then we'll file criminal charges against her." Dong Jin tells Seong everything and then says, "I'm leaving the office for good, and I'm thinking of using my company shares to buy back Sim Yu's house. But it's not just about the money, I want to take a long break." Next, we see Dong Jin and Sim Yu. Dong Jin says, "I'll try to convince my mom, but if she doesn't agree, you should do whatever the lawyer suggests." In the next scene, Sim Yu's mom meets Hija. She says, "I didn't know you had a son. You should thank him. It's because of him that I'm letting you go so easily. Leave this house quietly or I'll involve the police." After they leave, Hija receives a call from the police station. It turns out that Hija's boyfriend submitted all the recordings to the police, leading them to start an investigation against her. Back home, Sim Yu's mom says, "We won't take any legal action against Hija because I don't want us to go through the hassle of court proceedings." We then see Dong Jin taking Sim Yu's brother to a guitar store. Since he was leaving, he wanted to give him something before going. Sim Yu's brother likes a very expensive guitar but considers choosing a cheaper one instead. But Dong Jin buys the expensive one for him and says, "If you ever get a chance to play at a concert, use this guitar." Dong Jin then takes flowers and heads to Sim Yu's house. He meets Sim Yu's mom at her invitation regarding his own mother. Although Dong Jin still feels guilty, Sim Yu's mom talks to him kindly. She even says, "If you ever feel like eating something, just let me know." After leaving, Dong Jin calls Sim Yu and tells her, "I quit the company because I want to take a break." Sim Yu asks for some time and says, "I'm not ready for a breakup yet." Dong Jin replies, "I'll wait." Meanwhile, Hija recalls her lawyer's words. "There are many charges against you, and to avoid jail, you need a non-punishment letter from a family member." She goes to Sim Yu's aunt to get a contact number. The aunt doesn't give her the number but informs Sim Yu about it. Dong Jin visits the office where Seon tells him, "I'm planning to organize an art fair, and Min Hee will work with me on it." Seon hopes that Dong Jin will return to the office someday, but before leaving, Dong Jin says, "I'm not coming back. I want to live a different life." When Sim Yu learns about Hija from her aunt, she goes to meet her. Hija remembers seeing Sim Yu at Dong Jin's office and realizes she was an employee there. Sim Yu introduces herself and tells Hija who she really is. Hija is shocked. She then says, "Are you happy after doing all this to me? Do you still want more revenge? I have nothing left. You took your house back by educating my son. Now, what else do you want?" Sim Yu replies, "Do you even realize how badly you ruined my life? And you think my anger will go away so easily?" Then she adds, "I don't even know why I hated you so much. Maybe because hating my dad was too difficult for me." She then says, "I love Dong Jin, even knowing that he is your son." Hija is shocked and remains silent. Sim Yu continues, "From now on, I'll try to stop hating you." As Hija starts to leave, Sim Yu adds, "I'll send the non-punishment letter." Hija then goes home and tells Dong Jin, "I met Sim Yu." She asks, "Do you love her too?" Dong Jin replies, "Yes." Looking at Hija, it's clear she feels immense guilt for everything. That night, Sim Yu calls Dong Jin and says, "You once told me about a camping site in the middle of the forest where you'd take me. Can we go there?" Dong Jin says, "Okay, we'll go tomorrow morning." The next day, they go on a forest trip. They talk a lot and share their feelings. Dong Jin says, "I won't live a boring life, I'll live a fun one." Sim Yu replies, "Don't worry about me." It seemed like this was their official breakup meeting. As they say goodbye, they hug each other and get emotional. The scene shifts, and we see a time skip. 1 year later, at Dong Jin's old office, Su Hui has now taken over his position, and Min Hee is also working there, collaborating on organizing a fair. Meanwhile, Sim Yu often visits the places where they used to meet, hoping to see him again someday, but he never appears. Sim Yu visits Jun, who asks, "Do you still feel the same way?" Sim Yu replies, "Everything is the same. It's only been a year." On the other hand, we see Dong Jin, who has been traveling all this time. Now, he has returned to Seoul and, with the help of a friend, sells his camper. Dong Jin then takes his friend to the same cafe restaurant where he used to eat with Sim Yu. His friend asks, "Have you invested money in this restaurant or something? Every time we meet, you bring me here." Dong Jin just laughs it off. He is also in contact with his uncle and often visits his camping site. Sim Yu's brother notices her sadness and tells her, "Mom and I have no problem with Dong Jin. You can be in a relationship with him." But Sim Yu remains silent. The next day, Sim Yu's brother sends an invite to Dong Jin for a music festival, telling him, "I'll be performing there." Then he texts Sim Yu, "I invited Dong Jin to the festival too. There's a 50-50 chance he might come." We see Dong Jin arriving at the music festival, invited by Sim Yu's brother. At that moment, another artist is performing, so Dong Jin starts to leave. Just then, Sim Yu also arrives at the venue. As her brother begins his performance, Sim Yu starts looking for Dong Jin everywhere but doesn't see him. Dong Jin had already left, but hearing Sim Yu's brother's voice, he returns, and that's when he sees Sim Yu. On the other hand, Sim Yu notices her brother smiling at someone. She follows his gaze and sees Dong Jin standing there. They look at each other and smile. At that moment, it feels like they are the only two people there. Sim Yu runs toward Dong Jin and hugs him, and with that, the drama comes to an end.